The mess hall at Fort Wilkins always smelled the same, every single morning. The air carried that familiar blend of burnt coffee, overcooked eggs, and the sharp sting of industrial bleach. At 0600 hours, the place came alive with the sound of trays scraping across the metal counters, utensils clattering against dented plates, and voices, tired, half-awake voices, murmuring through the room like background static. Soldiers in uniform moved with mechanical rhythm, fueled by caffeine and routine. At one of the far tables near the wide windows, Alexandra Kane sat alone. A thin trail of steam rose from her bowl of oatmeal, untouched except for a few half-hearted spoonfuls. Her gaze wandered quietly across the room, scanning faces without lingering too long. She was new here, or at least that's what the paperwork said, a transfer from another unit, dropped among fresh recruits who hadn't yet learned that silence can be a weapon. Alexandra kept to herself. She spoke little, smiled even less, and never joined in on the mess hall chatter or crude jokes that made the long mornings bearable for others. Most saw her as another quiet recruit, the type trying to survive basic training without drawing attention. What no one knew was that she didn't belong here at all. Alexandra Kane was a Navy SEAL, one of the very few women in the world to earn that title. She had walked through fire, past trials that broke most men, and now, she had a mission that demanded invisibility. She wasn't here to train. She was here to observe. The instructors wanted her to blend in, to see how this batch of new soldiers behaved when they didn't know they were being watched. Especially around someone they couldn't easily figure out. 4 recruits had noticed her from day one. Ryder, built broad like a linebacker, loud and cocky, carried himself like someone who had always won fights before they even began. Mason was the opposite, lean, restless, with a smirk that lived permanently on his lips. Troy, heavier set and slower to speak, followed the group's energy wherever it went, never leading, never resisting. Then there was Blake, tall, sharp-eyed, the quiet observer of the group, his silence heavier than most words. That morning, their attention hung on Alexandra longer than usual. Ryder leaned forward over his tray, his tone half amused, half irritated. "She sits alone every day," he muttered. "What's her deal? Thinks she's too good for us." Mason snickered. "Maybe she's scared. We could fix that." Blake's voice came out low, almost thoughtful. "Or we find out what she's hiding." Ryder's grin widened. "Then let's see what happens." They waited. One by one, the recruits trickled out of the mess hall, trays stacked, boots echoing down the corridor until only a handful remained. Alexandra was still in her corner, reading from a small, worn notebook that looked older than her uniform. Their shadows fell across her table. Ryder planted both hands on the surface and leaned in. "Haven't seen you around much," he said, voice dripping with mock friendliness. "You antisocial, or just think you're better than the rest of us?" Alexandra looked up, her expression calm, unreadable. "Neither." Mason stepped closer, his grin widening. "Relax, we're just trying to be friendly. Team bonding, you know." Troy gave a short, nervous laugh. "Yeah, no one likes the odd one out." Alexandra's eyes flicked between them. Then she closed the notebook gently, placing it on the table. "If you're looking for a team moment," she said quietly, "this isn't it." Ryder's smirk deepened. "Cornering you. We're just talking." But his stance, feet wide, shoulders squared, told another story. Mason's hand darted out and snatched the notebook off the table. "What's this, huh? A diary?" He flipped through the pages, laughing. "Bet it's full of hearts and secrets." Her voice was steady, but it carried a cold precision. "Put it back." Blake tilted his head slightly, watching her. "Or what?" The room seemed to still for a second. Then she moved, fast, fluid, silent. Before anyone could react, she was on her feet, stepping into Mason's space. A twist of his wrist, a shift of weight, and the notebook was back in her hand. Mason stumbled backward with a gasp, clutching his arm. Ryder lunged next, reaching for her shoulder. In a blur, he was slammed face down on the table, his arm pinned behind his back, her knee driving into the base of his spine. Troy charged forward, and she pivoted, using Ryder's weight as leverage. She spun and flipped Troy over her hip. He hit the floor hard, colliding with Blake, who had hesitated a fraction too long. It was over in 40 seconds. When the last thud echoed through the mess hall, Alexandra stood calm and composed, breathing even. The notebook was tucked back in her hand, untouched. Ryder groaned from the floor. Mason cradled his wrist. Troy and Blake scrambled to their knees, stunned. Around them, the few recruits who had remained frozen in place stared in silence. Alexandra's voice broke the quiet. "Rule number 1, she said evenly, never underestimate someone you don't understand." Ryder pushed himself upright, face flushed with anger and humiliation. "What the hell are you?" She slid the notebook into her pocket. "Navy SEAL." The mess hall went silent again. Utensils paused mid-air. Even those who hadn't seen the fight turned to stare. The realization rippled through the room, whispers spreading like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone on base knew. No one joked around Alexandra after that. The 4 who had cornered her kept their distance, but not out of pure fear. Something in them had shifted. They had seen what quiet strength really looked like, and it had humbled them. That night, as the base lights dimmed, Blake found her in the gym. She was finishing a set of pull-ups, her muscles moving in precise rhythm, her expression unreadable. He stood there for a moment before speaking. "You could have gotten us all kicked out." She dropped from the bar, landing lightly, sweat glistening on her forehead. "I'm not here to ruin careers," she said simply. "I'm here to find out who deserves the uniform." He hesitated. "And," her eyes met his, "you're not done yet, but you've got a lot of work to do." She walked past him, leaving the faint scent of iron and resolve behind. Years later, when those same men found themselves deep in real combat zones, when bullets tore through the air, when explosions shook the earth, when chaos made the world go silent, they remembered her. They remembered the woman who dismantled them in a mess hall without breaking a sweat. In the worst moments, when fear clawed at their throats, they fought harder, sharper, stronger, because somewhere deep down, they wanted to be the kind of soldiers she would respect. And in those moments, far from Fort Wilkins, they finally understood what she had tried to teach them. That strength isn't loud, courage doesn't need an audience, and underestimating the quiet ones can change everything in less than a minute. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful True Mission stories.